All right, we're going to begin with a prayer. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give thanks for this day, for this chance to gather together, to learn and to grow together. We give thanks for Brad Soderberg's presence with us today. We ask that you open our hearts and minds during this conversation and help us to deepen our love of you and our love of neighbor. All this we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And Brad, thank you for being with us today. We are blessed to have Brad Soderberg with us. He is the Director of Scouting currently for the UVA men's basketball program, and before that, I believe, was assistant coach for a number of years. Yeah. And he's with us today to talk about the 5 pillars. But I understand, Brad, that before we get into the 5 pillars, you want to share something with us. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, first of all, good morning, and I'm not glad to be here. My plan was to be in Louisville, playing for a right to go to the Final Four. God had other plans.
If this was important.
Right. If it's okay with you, I'd like to just read a paragraph and tell you a story, and then go from there. Oops. I'm getting old, so I need my cheaters. So here's the paragraph. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his home on a rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. Those same rains came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. So those of you who are in the Word know that that's from Matthew chapter 7. So here's the story. In 1995, I took an assistant coaching job at the University of Wisconsin, the Badgers, in the Big Ten. The first day that we met as a staff, our head coach sat down around our conference table with all the assistants. He walked in, did not say a word, but he put an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper in front of each of us. And he said, "Gentlemen, what I've learned in 30 years as a college basketball coach is on the backside of this piece of paper. If we are successful in implementing what's on this sheet of paper, we are going to be successful. If we can't, we will fail." The man that was the head coach is Tony Bennett's dad, Dick Bennett. He was my college coach at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, about 10 or 15 years prior to that. I was thrilled to be able to be his assistant for the Badgers. See, I grew up in Wisconsin, always wished I could play for them, but wasn't good enough. So to be there was like, oh my. The bad news was I had been a Badger fan my whole life, and they had been pitiful. No, I'm not joking about this. In the half century prior to Dick Bennett's arrival at Wisconsin, the Badgers had been to March Madness, which is going on right now, one time. 50 years. 50 years. They'd been there one time. We were taking over a trash fire. Unbelievable. So back to the paper. So I had played for Coach Bennett. I knew what was on the backside of that paper. We got to play defense. We got to take good shots. We can't turn the ball over. We got to get back on defense. That's what he had told us, and it worked. So I knew it was on the sheet. So I flipped it over when he told us all to flip it over. The first word on the sheet was humility. Huh? The second word was passion. The third word was unity. The fourth word was servanthood. And the fifth word was thankfulness. Where did he get this? And how is that going to help us beat Indiana under Bobby Knight? Michigan State under Judd Heathcote. And I could go right on down the list. The Badgers stink. We need to get players. Forget humility. We need players. And we got to fill the arena. Nope. That's not the foundation that Dick Bennett wanted to build the program on. That rock had to be solid. I didn't understand it then. That was 1995. I was a puppy in the coaching business. He knew the winds were going to blow. He knew the storms were going to come. He had to have something that would take this team that had been to one tournament in 50 years and still be able to survive. Long story short, our third year at Wisconsin, we made it in the NCAA tournament, March Madness. Our fifth year there, I'm going to relay to you the words of our play-by-play man when this special moment happened. 5 years in, after having been a dumpster fire for 50 years, 5 years in, using this as the foundation, this was the last thing he said at the end of one of our games. The game that the Cavaliers would have been playing today had things worked out the way we hoped. Mike LePay was the play-by-play guy for the Badgers, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I do not believe what I'm about to say. The Wisconsin Badgers are going to the Final Four." And I still get choked up about that. I did not believe what my coach was saying. Humility and passion and unity and servanthood and thankfulness. How in the world is that going to get us to build a program that can win a national championship? That's where I first heard about the Pillars. Now his young son, who's got all these accolades, he copied them. He copied Pops. And it works. So I want to just tell you before we talk, if I could take all of you right now and get in a van and go to JPJ, go back into the locker room and the lounge and the practice facility, you will see those 5 words everywhere. Everywhere. But let me tell you something, you can put words wherever you want. I've seen a lot of programs where they put, power on the back or unity. Those are just words. Tony teaches those things more than passing and catching. If you brought any one of the players he's coached during his 14 years here and said, "What are the pillars?" They could rip them off, boom, 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 boom. Tell us about them. They could give you, because he stresses them more than passing and catching. He stresses them more than rebounding and shooting. If we have kids that don't show humility, they will get ripped. If they lack passion, if they're lukewarm in any way, they're going to hear about it. If they miss a shot, all right, we'll live with it. If they make a bad turnover like Kihei did, God help him. It's so painful for him right now. He's struggling to come out of his apartment. Social media is crushing him. It's the world we live in now. That stuff's okay. We can deal with those, but you lack unity. You divide Tony's house of players. Woo! And it's worked. It's worked. So what I'm excited to talk about today is college basketball is so insignificant in the big picture. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. But what about our families? I'm the father of 3 and a grandfather of 6. We have to have a foundation because the winds do come to our kids and to our grandkids. And the showers are going to come down on them. Have we as parents and grandparents given them a foundation where it's going to happen, we know it. Can they stand or are they going to crumble? And I think I've been a coach now 38 years. When I retire, which won't be long, I'll take that away. Am I helping my grandkids and my own children raise their children with a rock foundation? So that's what, in a nutshell, that's what the pillars are all about. Now we could talk for 4 or 5 hours about the detail. So
Thank you, Brad, for getting us started there. So these are the core values of UVA's basketball program, but more than that, you're saying these are the core values of the players' lives, of your life, of your family life. So unpack for us the 5 core values, the 5 pillars, what they mean, and if you want to apply it to the team, that's great, or if you want to apply it in your own life about how you live these out, we'd love to hear that.
right. If I go back to the story I told you about when Dick Bennett shared that with our staff, each of those words had a series of dots behind it and a phrase. So behind humility, ... know who you are. That's been applicable to everybody. For example, as it relates to our basketball team, if you know our team, Francisco Cafaro, we call him Big Papi, the kid from Argentina, he had to know who he was. And when he tries to shoot a 3 or do something we don't want him to do, Papi, know who you are, man. It requires humility. He may want to be the leading scorer. He has to have the humility to understand that's not his role. Okay? So passion in that sheet of paper, ... Don't be lukewarm. Have you heard that before? Christ said, I'll spit you out of my mouth. Wow. So as I got done reading those 5 back in 1995, I looked at Coach Bennett and I said, I'm a Christian myself. I said, Coach, those are all biblical. He goes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. If I'm going to build this program on a rock, he's a devout Christian as well. I can't build it on something that's not connected to Christ and what he told us. So every one of those, and I could go on down the list. So unity, don't divide our house, behind the dots. Don't divide our house. And he said, if I can teach a group of young men in a trivial basketball team, if I could teach them the importance of not dividing their house, they'll be better fathers. They'll be better husbands, and it could draw this team together. And there were so many analogies where he would teach them collectively we are better than we are adding up the sum of each individual part. What a lesson. Now, I've been able to communicate with alumni from those various teams. It's unbelievable how they grasp that message. Whether it came from Tony as the head coach or Dick as the head coach. Or in my case, I've been a head coach for 19 years, and guys call back, Coach, I'm raising my son now, and he's having a hard time at his college. He said, but we talked to him about, staying passionate. Don't get lukewarm. Don't get discouraged. And that's when it's gratifying. Go win a national championship. Wow, incredible. But the gratification of knowing that young men are being impacted in a positive way. So there's a couple more, but you get the point.
Of the 5 pillars, has one in particular been maybe the hardest to live out and embody and not just be a word on the wall, as you were saying?
I think, I can't speak for everybody, but I've observed 17 to 22-year-old men for 38 years. That's all I've done. Humility. In the world that those boys come from, in order to play at this level, they've been the best. Like when they were 8th graders, what they're hearing is, oh man, you got a chance to be a McDonald's All-American. You're amazing. You're incredible. Well, any kid hears that for 5-6 years, they're going to come in, with their nose up. So for them to put their arms around humility, what? You talk about humility, and Coach, there's so many things that Tony says now that just resonate with me. He says, for example, related to humility, he says, fellas, this is what's hard for you. The world out there tells you you are owed this. This is yours. You deserve this. That's not true. You need to humble yourself and understand that nothing is given. You have to earn it. And those are messages that truthfully the world is not telling kids anymore. They're so, I don't mean to get, but that's not a message they're hearing.
There's a lot of entitlement is what you're saying.
Absolutely, in my opinion, yes.
And in a way that's connected to the value of gratitude, isn't it?
No question.
If we see all that we have as a gift from God,
Yes.
And not something that we're necessarily entitled to or that we've earned even sometimes.
Right. That thankfulness is again, I think that's a hard one for all of us as we get older, especially when we're to be, it's the ... behind that one, thankfulness, ... in all circumstances. That's what it said. So another quick story. When we were at Wisconsin, we had to play at Purdue one of the years we were there. It was an ESPN game. It was the game of the week or whatever. We got smashed, like 30. We got crushed. It was embarrassing. So I'm a young coach. I'm like, what is Dick going to say to the players now when we came back in the locker room? So I'm standing in the back behind the chairs, and he's up in front. To this day, I shake my head. He goes, fellas, I know that hurt. I want you to be thankful. I looked at the other assistant and said, what in the... He said, don't forget how this feels. This is going to help us. Think about the things that have happened in your lives, my life, where you go, oh, that's horrible. That's terrible. Like, pick a topic which, you have a granddaughter that's very, very sick, and you're just give thanks, because that experience, if you handle it correctly, is going to draw you closer to the Lord. It may draw you closer to the mother, your daughter who's the mother of this child. There's good that can come from everything. It's been hard for me to embrace that, and certainly hard for college athletes.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way that St. Paul talked about finding joy even in the midst of difficult circumstances. And how we can find God even when we're struggling.
Yes.
We've had a number of people who have talked to us in this forum about the ways in which suffering can be transformative, if looked at in the right way, which I think is what we're getting at.
And again, in the Word, we hear that everyone is going to have rain come upon them. It's not just rain is going to be on the bad people.
Right.
We are all going to experience that, the rain meaning difficulty. We're not immune to it because we're in a Christian environment.
Right, absolutely. So obviously these pillars, as you've been saying, can apply at lots of different levels, whether it's sports or individually or in community. I wonder how they apply to the church. As a devout Christian, where do you think the church in general falls short with regard to these five?
Wow, that's a hard question for a dumb basketball coach. I don't know. I think because the church is made up of sinful beings, all of us included, there's plenty of it. There's plenty of places we fall short. I think if I can only speak for myself, I think that trying to understand how big our God is and how little we are can help to understand a lot of things better. I speak quite often, so pardon me for this analogy. My wife and I, when we first got here, we wanted to go to Virginia Beach. We had never seen the ocean, or other than flying over it. So we were sitting there sunbathing, and I wiped the sand off my hand, and literally, I'm not making this up, there was one little piece of sand on my finger, and I was just looking at it, and I wasn't, really reflecting. And the backdrop was the ocean. I go, Lord, you're the ocean. I'm the sand. And then I thought, no, that's not right. God is way bigger than the ocean, and I'm way smaller than the sand. And I think, again, back to the question about the church, and I'm a member of the church. Don't we sometimes, Lord, why are you making me go through this? Duh, he's got a bigger picture than I do. He's bigger than the ocean. I'm smaller than the sand. How can I question? So that's a off-the-cuff answer to a tough question.
So in a way, that's humility, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
As you were talking, my mind also went to passion. And you mentioned not being lukewarm. And I wonder if that's another challenge for Christians in our day and age.
No doubt. No doubt.
What would you say about that?
Again, I can only speak for myself, but if, as it relates to my profession, we're asking young men to be all in. And more specifically, when I was a head coach, I would say, hey, Marcus, if I would rather have you tell me, Coach, this isn't for me, I'm going to step away from basketball and not be a part of the program. Thanks for everything. Or say, Coach, you just tell me what we need to do. I'm in, and I'm going to make sure my teammates follow along. What I could not stand was a player that would go in a meeting before the seat, Coach, you can count on me. But then once the season started, he would kind of fake his way through. I could tell he wasn't all in, but he wasn't going to admit he was out either. And folks, I don't mean to preach, but we have to be all in our relationship with Christ. And that requires effort. It requires private prayer time when you don't feel like it, or being willing to forgive when you just are furious instead of faking it. And sometimes I catch myself, I'm going, man, you are a fake. You're not, if you could sit face to face with Christ and you, like really he's right in front of you, you would like fall on your knees and just forgive me, Lord, because I'm a sinful man. So again, I think that's quite a challenge to be all in.
Well, we're pulled in so many different directions,
Yes, sir.
aren't we? So you talk about being all in, say, in the basketball program. Well, yes, but they also are being pulled in a variety of different directions. They're young people. They're trying to explore and grow. They have their academic side as well. So that's part of our challenge too as Christians, right? That we're being pulled in 1,000 different directions. It's hard to be all in and fully passionate about it.
That's true, and yet the ocean is a part of all of the things that we're involved in. So we can be all in and still be a great businessman, or we could be all in and be a great mom, or we can, in fact, I think if we're all in, we're better in all those areas. You know, I mean, I'm a measly basketball coach, but because I tried to, you know, be a Christian coach, that can be holy.
So what you're saying then, Brad, is it's about our framing, how we look at it again, right? So you were talking about reframing how we think about the difficulties in life and seeing the ways in which they can be transformative and empowering and educational. But this is about reframing how we think about all the things we do. Do we see them in light of our Christian discipleship or not? Do we see them as ways in which we can love God and love neighbor or not, right?
Exactly.
Once we reframe it like that, then everything is about being a follower of Jesus.
Exactly. And if I'm an example, 60 years isn't enough time to get it right.
Right.
So it's hard. It's hard.
Well, I imagine that many people here have questions for you, and maybe questions about the basketball program as well. Yes, an individual has already stood up.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I wish I wasn't.
We wish you were as well.
All right.
Just to make you feel better, I was the rector of this church for many years, the minister here.
Uh-huh.
And once upon a time, I persuaded Pete Gillen to come.
Huh?
It was in the midst of a moment when we thought we were going all
Right.
and we didn't, so suddenly he was available.
Right.
I do have a question, but one other thought is that I was really, my heart hurt for T.Hay Clark when you said that. Would you convey to him that, we are in fact just grateful for the thrills that he gave us for all these
I'll tell him. Yeah, the mom who passed. It was like the reverse of the
Right.
right.
But I'd love for you to talk about servanthood, the ... for servanthood. It's so counter to our culture right now, but I happen to think it's sort of at the core of life.
Right. I think Tony added or changed the ... behind servanthood that his dad had. His dad said, servanthood ... take care of your brother. And I think the theme is the same, but Tony's got a little bit different description. But that's a hard one for all of us because servanthood is the opposite of selfishness. Being what's in it for me. What do I get out of it? And it's very difficult to teach that to 17, 18, and 19-year-olds in the world they live in now, especially in light of the way the NCAA is changing. Now kids are, not only how many minutes can I play, are you going to help me get in the NBA, but give me some money now. And I'm very sad because I think there's no more amateur sports. So back to your question, servanthood. This is one that Coach is very creative in the way he teaches servanthood in light of the fact that we're at a secular university. And in theory, you can't speak about your faith. You could get fired. And I know it's being videoed, but he's very good at, the guys understand where we as coaches stand in our life of faith. We don't pound them and say, listen, young man, either you get to church or your minutes are going to drop on Saturday. You're not going to, it's not like that. But for example, the way that he can say, you need to serve each other. If Kihei's man gets by him off the dribble, don't be so, I don't want my man to score, I'm going to get pulled out of the game. Help him. He needs help. And then if the ball gets thrown to your man, someone else will help you. And that's just one little trivial example of, be your brother's keeper. Serve each other. Serve. And I'm a little, what's the word? I'm a little bit, I wish I had done the things I've learned from Tony when I was a head coach. I'm jealous of how good he is, not at just the X's and O's and his demeanor on the bench and all that stuff, but how he shares his Christian faith without being abrasive, without pounding the Bible on them. But they get it. They get it. And I know they get it because guys like Malcolm Brogdon and Anthony Gill come back and they'll say, Coach, I was a stubborn young kid. I get it now. I get it. And I think that's how it is with our children. When they're 30, 35, you wondered if anything mattered back then. And then you go, oh, they didn't notice, So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's that one could take hours.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
When you and Tony are sitting in the living room of a recruit who's a McDonald's All-American, we hope, do these come up?
Coach is not afraid at all to share the foundation that we, subscribe to. In fact, it's one of the first things they hear. In fact, if you go into Coach's office, the backdrop, his desk is there, is the size of the entire wall, an overview of the arena that we played in the day we won the national championship. It just takes your breath away. But then across the top, there's 3 words up here and 2 on the bottom, and you know what they are: humility, unity. So the instant they come in and are in front of him, he'll say, I'm not saying you need to subscribe to these. It doesn't make you a bad person, but you need to understand, should you come here, we're going to hold you to these because we believe strongly enough that this has an impact on the success of our program. We're we're going to expect you to be humble. And we'll work you through it, and you won't be perfect. In other words, he doesn't shy away from it in any way. And you know what? I think we get more players because of that, and because mom and dad are sitting there going, yeah, than if we never addressed it. So, yeah, we talk about it in a home visit, when they visit UVA, when we talk to them on the phone. Many of the things we send out via, text message. We've got a young man that helps us with all this social media stuff, and those words are present all the time.
Your organizational culture is just very clear, and I think that's probably incredibly inspiring for people.
Yeah, it makes it we all we don't have to agree with everything.
Right.
But we understand
This is what we're about.
this is what we're about. There's no question about that.
Yes. What other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, back there, Audrey.
So I was struck by just now you said, all of these 5 pillars are going to impact the success of our program. And I work here with the children and the youth, and success is very much an important thing for them. They're younger than those 17-year-olds.
I know. I have grandkids.
But what I think as a UVA men's basketball fan myself is that success isn't just in winning the national championship. I think that we can all here who experience the program firsthand or on TV knows that success manifests in many different ways. And that's the other thing I think that you all have been so amazing to do is produce these successful people, not just on the court, but off the court. And then it does ripple and have, an effect on the community and others, and the pride
That's
that
great
we
to hear. I'm going
have.
to share that with Tony tomorrow, because that means a lot to him. But I want to share 2 comments regarding that. As assistants, we get so many compliments that are residuals of being with Tony. I've said this 100 times at booster events. If I picked 4 or 5 of you out of this room and said, next year you guys are going to be Tony's assistant coaching staff, get rid of the guys that are there, Soderberg, Williford, Vandross, so on, the program would continue at a high level. Why? Tony's that good. I have a right to say it. I've been in the business 38 years. I've seen everything. He is special. He is special. I wrote him a little note after the tough loss, thoughts about UVA, and I said on there, Tony, you are a first ballot Hall of Famer in college basketball. You're a first ballot. He was hurt, that the losses hurt, really hurt. And it hurt him. We've had the UMBC, we've had Ohio. This is hard. The winds will blow. The storms will come. But we're still good. We're still good. We want to go back there again, but that's hard. What was the second thing I was going to say? Our players reflect that. You should know that we vet them very hard before we ask them to accept our scholarship offer. Frustrating for the assistant sometimes. Like, we've scouted this kid. He can shoot that ball. Woo! And we need a shooter. And then we get the visit set up, and we find a date. They're going to go meet with Tony, and then they come out of the meeting with Tony, and he goes, no. What do you mean, no? He shoots better than Kyle Guy did. No. I go, what? He goes, it's not right. It's not going to work. And I trust him now. When I was here my first year, I'm like, that idiot. But he's got a great feel. I don't mean to make him a god, but he's as good as I've seen in the business. I jokingly say, if you make a grocery list of the 15 things you're looking for in a college basketball coach, good with the alumni, good recruiter, composure on the bench, X's and O's, knows how to implement a system, foundational principles, A+, 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 A+. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I just love UVA, and I feel so bad for
Yeah.
what's going on. I thought the guy should have been more servanthood and run up and help him out. And we would have had someone to pass to, but
I think he thought that too.
I just love UVA basketball and loved it. I went to school with Ralph Sampson and
Oh,
I've
wow.
just been a crazy Who fan ever since. But I just love the pillars he's brought, and it's so evident all through our community. When I first quit working, I volunteered in a little school, and I'm coming out the door, and 2 basketball players are walking in the day after you guys got crushed by Pittsburgh, and it was like,
Yeah.
pretty normal here, you know.
Yeah.
I figured you guys would be home, like, no, this is the day we come and we do
Yeah.
big
They do a
things.
lot of stuff like that, and they,
All through the community, and every time I run into Tony, he is so sweet. The day my dad had a stroke, I ran into him and gave me a big hug and let me take a picture with him.
see, and the thing that's, I can tell you this because I knew him when he was a 6th grader, it's genuine. He goes, okay, I gotta make a good appearance here because I'm the basketball. He'll do it for, like, we'll be somewhere recruiting together and he just does that. It's not fake. And I think that's really good. One little quick story about Kihei. So the pain of, when was it, Thursday of a week ago, we got done and bus drove us back to our hotel, and our plane's gonna fly us back later in the night. we get to our hotel, and they have us go through a side door because there's too many people. And Kihei has a little brother named Nala. And Nala is holding the door for the team. And he's crying. And then Tony walks in, and the first person there was Kihei's dad, Malik. Gives Tony a bear hug. And then his mother and the other brother. And then when Kihei and his dad embrace, all the people in the lobby everybody was crying. That's real stuff. That's like, people go, that idiot, we could have advanced. But that's a young man. That's a little somebody's son, and it is hard. It's just, but there's great advantages of being, in this limelight, and there's stuff that's hard. So that's just a little story because you're a Kihei fan.
What's so remarkable about what you're saying, Brad, is that winning basketball games, which of course is critical, is not one of the 5 pillars, right? So in a way, you all have defined success independent of what the final score is at the game.
Correct.
So you could say, even after a game that you've lost, we were successful because we met all of these 5 core values.
And that's where Tony is better as a head coach than I was. Because when my team lost, I'm not killing myself, but I couldn't.
But you would have said we failed, right, in that situation.
The guys would get that impression. But Tony will go, fellas, we made some basketball mistakes that we're going to correct. And he might hit a couple. I've told you we need backside help when the ball gets lobbed into the post, okay? But he said, I want to tell you something, though. You kept knocking. One other quick thing. If you would come to any of our games and sit in the locker room before the game, home or away, our managers are assigned to have a door knocker attached to the door, home or away. And every player, coach, manager, staff member knocks the knocker on the way out to the court. No one knows this. But it's another, just keep knocking. If it's going great, just don't get all into yourself. If it's going bad, keep knocking. That's a message for all of us. The bills are piling. Keep knocking. I don't want to go to work. Keep knocking. It's a message.
Knock and the door shall be open.
Yes, sir. That's how he explained it initially. Anyway, I don't know what the question was, but
That's
we
great.
keep knocking.
What other questions do we have? Yes, right there, Ron.
The guys that get very little playing time, if any, how do they stay motivated, stay involved?
It's very hard. As I said earlier, these young men are the best at where they came from. I'll give you a perfect example. Tane Murray, Tane, the kid from New Zealand. He played on the New Zealand junior national team that went to Athens, Greece a couple summers ago. He's one of the best in his country. He hasn't improved to the point where he moves ahead of the 7 or 8 guys who get the lion's share of the minutes. He's a special kid. Part of it is the way Tony vetted him when he first came in. He talked to him about Jack Salt, his fellow New Zealander, and all that Jack gave us. And nowadays, that's even more of an issue because I don't know how much kids can transfer and not have to sit out a year. So many times it happens where kids go, I'm not getting any time, I'm out. One of the jobs as director of scouting, I monitor the portal. There have been 1,000 Division I basketball players enter the portal since the season ended. That is an incredible statement about the lack of commitment, the lack of, well, it's not working out, I'm going to the next place. So it's very difficult for all these young men because, as I said, they were the all-state, all-country, all whatever, certainly best player on their team, leading scorer on their team. And now the humility and the servanthood required, it takes a special group. And so that's why I can't scoff at Tony when he comes out of that meeting with the mom and dad and the kid and go, no, it ain't gonna work. And I don't know how he figures that all out, but it's hard for those kids. But coach is very good about it. He says so many times, fellas, you that aren't playing, I know how hard this is. Stay ready, your time is coming, get back in the gym. Some do, some don't.
Does he have any particular practices he uses to motivate these players?
I think he's one of the best motivators in the country. And seldom is the motivation fire and brimstone, which is, I think, how he's adapted to today's player. The reason I say that, his dad is the exact opposite. His dad was a Vince Lombardi and Bob Knight. Get your blah, 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 and Tony's not that way. I've said it to him 100 times. I said, you are so not like your dad. And he said, it's right there. He said, sometimes I can just feel it coming up. But one more thing, or whatever, Tony, if you ever come to a UVA game, the players come out on the court at 30 minutes before the game. Tony goes with our team chaplain. And I don't know what they talk about, but I know, I firmly believe he gets his mind right to not be a volcanic eruption on the bench. It's so emotional, it's so intense, it's so competitive. And he is a competitor, ferocious competitor. But he's also a man of God. And I think he has, George Morris is his name, he's our team pastor.
Yeah, he's been here.
Yeah, and George, I think they go up in his office at home on home games and then in a coach's locker room on the road. And he just says, George, help me get my mind right so that I'm composed and that I coach like Christ to the best of my ability. He's a motivator. He just has a great knack. And I think it's because he's a man of God.
Yes, Cindy.
I have a related question. So right before the game, they do the 5 starting players, and then they say, Coach Tony Bennett, and the camera goes to him, and he has all the players around him, and he's talking to them, and obviously he's already coached them, he's told them. So that must be the last motivational message. Is that what is the last thing he says to them?
No, it's not. At that point, it's not a motivational message. It'll be, if we get the tip, we're going to run side fist. Yeah, we're going to run side fist in the post, whatever.
Because I'm always trying to figure out what can he be saying now.
No, well, yeah, now it's game mode.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the time his big thing is he always wants the players to be free. He said, we've put in our time, we've worked in practice, we've drilled you on the mechanics of what you need to do, we've gone over the scouting report. Now free yourself up. Try not to be tight. And sometimes you can see they're tight, bigger. But once the game, the horn blows, it's all, what do we have to do to beat this opponent? So what he's saying to them is, if we get the tip, this is the play we're going to run. And if we don't get the tip, that's the first play we'll run once we're on offense.
Yes, Julie.
This whole community hangs on every word Tony Bennett says. And after the UMBC loss, when he had the stage,
Yes, ma'am.
and he talked about weeping at night, joy comes in the morning, that message went so far beyond the team and our community. And I've been under a rock the last 10 days, so I don't know what his message was after the most recent loss. But did he say something, and does he realize that's such an opportunity? No
I think
one
he-
remembers after the wins. They remember what he said after that loss.
Two things regarding that. And again, Tony, if you see this sometime, I hope I'm not saying the UMBC loss, where what happens after a game is there's about 15 minutes before the coaches have to go to their press conference. We have a sports information director that's in charge of media relations and happens to be his childhood best friend, Eric Bacher, who I taught with Tony in Stevens Point back in the day. Anyway, so Eric knocks on the door 15 minutes after the UMBC. Silence in our coaches' line. Tony, it's time to go. Got to go to the press conference. Tony, Lord, I do not know what I'm about to say. Help me. Then he walked, however, 100 yards to that press room, and he said what you just made reference to. He's a man of God. He didn't know what to say. He asked for help. That's what you like about him. That's why. He's not perfect, but he tries as hard as he can to rely on Christ to give him inspiration, to help him lead the team, to help him motivate his players. Again, I don't know if I'm saying things out of turn, but he and Laurel, his wife, who I think is one of the biggest reasons he is who he is, because she loves the Lord as well. They will go on a Sunday night to the locker room and pray for each kid in front of their locker. I'm like, man, I am a lousy coach. But they do that. Who does that? And that's the hands that this program is in. And Lord, please make him stay forever. Because he gets everybody and their mother wants him to, run their program, NBA and college. And he likes it here though. So that's good. Scott, yeah.
I think you kind of referenced this a little bit earlier, but how do you see the NIL money affecting the recruiting and how
It's bad.
Coach Bennett and you could kind of hold them to these pillars? And
It's bad. If you're not familiar, what's happened is recently, within the last 2 years, the NCAA has acknowledged that the rules of the NCAA cannot prohibit young men or women from earning money based on their name, image, and likeness. NIL, name, image, and likeness. So it's no longer amateur athletics. It's not. The kids are getting paid. So if we as assistants are beating the bushes trying to find these kids, and when Tony vets him is going to be what we're looking for, does he shoot it well? Does it fit the position that we need? Blah, 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 blah. And we finally narrow it down to X number of guys. And then at the end of our recruiting spiel, the mom and the dad and the kid go, well, how much money am I going to get? Because this school is going to give us this. And that school's going to give us this, and you're only going to give us this. I'm sad, because I've been in the NCAA 38 years, and I just don't like what's happening. I'm not begrudging the guys for getting their money, but it's not level anymore. I don't know. It's just kind of a mess. So the NIL is a huge thing right now, really big. And, we're trying to work our way through how to make it happen and still make the pillars the big thing. In a weird way, I might be optimistic. It might be even a bigger advantage to have the pillars in light of all of the cash chasing that guys are doing. But maybe I'm naive, but I think we could become even a brighter light, because this is one thing where if you have a team of 12 guys and you're the coach, he's getting $500,000 a year. He's getting $100,000 a year. He's only getting $5,000. When you ask these guys in the synergy of a game and a practice, come together, fellas. Wait a minute, coach. You like him more than me. You're giving him $500,000. And I'm not kidding. Those are the numbers. The 17 years old, they get $500,000? You kidding me? What are we doing?
Undermines the team.
Yes or no? I mean, that guy can really play. He's big and strong and tough, and we got to figure out a way to defend him. So,
But the team can't thrive unless every element is engaged and motivated and passionate about the work.
in theory,
Well, Brad, we've come to the end of our time, but this has been really wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's give Brad Soderberg a round of applause. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.